Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine with Nick Barris.
Oh, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. I'm Nick Barris here. It's a Monday. Hope you had a good weekend. We're back in the saddle today, getting things rolling and inviting you to join in the conversation. This morning, we're going to talk about millions and millions and millions of dollars, all right? And it's federal dollars that come to the state, money that can be spent and set aside to help those in need. I suppose those lower income individuals, children, with regard to jobs, all kinds of programs that can be there. But it is federal money, and it comes in the form of a block grant. And the question is, how is that money being spent? There's recently been, I think some stories done on how some of that money, instead of being used over the last several years, has been set aside into a fund and not being used and just being held. And the question is, all right, well, what are you going to use it for? And why is it being held instead of being used on an annual basis to go toward many of these services to help the needy? So we're going to get into some of that this morning and take some of your phone calls if you have questions or comments. I know this is your money. It's taxpayer money coming from the federal level. But with us this morning is Stephanie Whitt, Executive Vice President of the Beacon Center of Tennessee. It's nice to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
Well, a lot of these stories came out because of some of the research that the Beacon Center did looking into how these the block grant money was being spent or not spent,
yes.
Correct?
Yeah, we took an in-depth look at all three of the state's largest entitlement programs.
Okay.
So SNAP, which people know as food stamps, TANF, which is the program we're talking about today, and then TennCare, which is the state's Medicaid program.
Right. All right. And TANF, again, what would you say that is? So what kind of services under that are
right
provided?
Now, it's primarily a cash assistance program for low-income parents who are with children that are working. So it kind of helps them meet ends meet along the way as they're moving up the economic ladder.
All right. And TANF, again, it's federally funded?
It's federally funded through a block grant. It started in 1996 after there was some welfare reform at the federal level. And then it's sort of been coming to the state ever since then. And depending on what's going on at the state level, it can be spent in a variety of different ways to help families.
About $190 million this past year. I guess it changes. Every year, is that about it, that amount?
It's assessed based on your state's population and inflation and that sort of thing, but it's been around the same amount.
Do you have a rough number, maybe how many people can benefit under the TANF program in Tennessee? How many thousands?
So right now there's about 41,000 individuals on TANF
that meet the financial requirements of being needy.
For it, but it is for the cash assistance portion.
Okay.
But the money can be spent in other ways besides cash assistance to help families. So for that portion, it's your most needy, but the state can set standards for who can receive the other types of assistance. All
right, let's talk a little bit just for folks, maybe they've likely heard of the Beacon Center, but maybe you can give a little, some people hear Beacon Center, and I think, it's fair to say that Beacon Center is fiscally conservative, cautious about spending money and wants to make sure money is spent wisely?
Yeah, absolutely. We are a free market think tank. We primarily focus on economic issues, barriers to employment, things like occupational licensing is something that we've been really focused on. And so we take a look at the state budget every year. We take a look at the funding sources coming in, where they're going out, and sort of analyze that each year. Okay,
so in this case, what took you by surprise as you looked into TANF?
So we began looking into these programs. One of the questions that we asked, and I was nearing the end of the research, was, how much did we spend last year? And the department came back with around $71 million.
And you're like, wait a second, you're getting $190 million and you spent $71 million?
Right, and so then we were thinking, okay, well, where does the rest of that money go? And it goes into a reserve type of fund that can be used for other things.
But it's right now set aside, collecting interest or whatever. I assume it's in, and it's not just this past year. How much money is in this reserve fund?
$732 million.
That means they have to have been setting aside money from this block grant that came into the state for at least the last 5 years like this,
yes,
I would think.
Definitely. And you want to have some type of reserve, because if you ever have a year where it spikes really high, then you, as far as
in terms of need?
Yes.
Okay.
Then you would want some type of reserve fund available. But when we're only spending 71, you could almost double the program and still not even spend your year's grant that you're getting.
Right.
And so that leads us to believe, well, you wouldn't even touch the reserve fund if there was a downturn in the economy, because you have all this excess funds.
All right, and this can be, and you're great at explaining this. I really appreciate it. I'm learning from you right now. But it is complex, and maybe people at home are hearing this and they're going to say, okay, well, maybe the federal government, which is your tax dollars, yours and mine, is giving too much money. Maybe we don't need 190 million, maybe we need 71 million. On the other hand, some may say, and I'm going to ask you this, is there potentially need where they could be spending this 190 million instead of setting, more than half of it aside into this fund? What do you think?
Yeah, there's 2 points that we made in our research. One was that we had this reserve fund available, and if we have it, we should be utilizing it in some way. And the other point was if we're going to continue to tell the federal government that we need $190 million a year as a state, and we're recognizing $190 million in our state budget every year, but we're only spending 71 million, then we really need to evaluate whether or not we should continue to ask for that amount, or if we are, let's utilize it to help working families.
And is it your belief, based on some of the organizations you've heard from, that the need certainly is there?
Absolutely.
I mean, that they could be using the vast majority of that money?
Yes, absolutely. And the largest thing that we're hearing from our child care as a barrier. I'm 6 months pregnant, and so thank you. And so my husband and I know very much so the struggle to find child care in Nashville.
And it's not cheap.
It's not cheap. And so luckily we have different resources and family and things that are around us that can help us when we get to that point. But there are a lot of families in Tennessee, and especially in Nashville, that don't have that backup to help them or the resources to be able to get the child care that they need. This is a great opportunity because it will allow the parent to continue to work while also helping with their child care needs.
All right, and this is what we'll get into as the show progresses, and we can take calls. I mean, again, the Beacon Center, as we said, is traditionally fiscally conservative. You want to, and you've already said, it's probably a wise move to have some money set aside.
Absolutely.
But in your mind, you think this is probably, I mean, that's an awful lot of money. And the question's got to be out there, what are they going to use it for? And again, it's earmarked to a degree under this block grant, where they just can't go spend it all of a sudden on some pork belly project someplace else. It's got to be pork barrel, rather, project someplace else. It's got to be spent one way or the other on some of these projects for the poor.
Absolutely. And
so
in Tennessee.
In Tennessee. So it's just sitting there. What have you been able, have you talked to some of the lawmakers, or?
Yeah, we have heard from some lawmakers since the report came out. They were surprised
as well. Well, who
bit.
ultimately makes this call? Is it the governor's office? And again, we think it's gone on for more than 5 years, so it's not just under our current governor, but it would have been under the past governor as well.
It really is up to the department and the administration when they're putting their budget together, but ultimately then the legislature kind of votes on that budget and they all figure things out. So I have an understanding that I think there'll be some type of conversation going forward that hopefully will change the way we're looking at this program.
What's your concern when you see that there's that much there? Why do you think this is something that was worth definitely going public with? And it's public money. It's not some big secret you can get this info, but why do you think this is a concern?
I think it's a concern because it's so close to reaching $1 billion. If they continue down the same trajectory and they don't spend more than 71 million, you have to think that's $120-ish million that you're going to have each year in excess. So if we're at 732, you're going to approach $1 billion fairly soon. That's almost as much as we have in the entire state's rainy day fund, for one program. And so I think we really need to take a look at the program and how it's being administered and what options are available, because if it was passed in 1996 and then it came to the state a few years later, when the state actually passed what they wanted to do with the money, we have a tremendous opportunity here to relook at the program. It's been 20-30 years, so let's take a look at it.
I mean, one thing you worry about is that the federal government, who knows how slow they move, they look at this and say, well, they don't need that much, they're setting all this aside. The other part of it is, and I don't know if you think this, but I just suspect there's some other reason behind closed doors where they're thinking, even though it's earmarked, that the day could come, well, there's $1 billion. If nothing else, even though they can't spend it directly, maybe they can borrow against it. I just think there's some other reason that money's being stashed to cover someone's butt should we have some kind of shortfall down the road in some other aspect of our government besides helping the needy. That's just my take. I mean, I just don't get it. That $1 billion being set aside like this, there's something else going on here. Now, I don't know what it is. There's something else going on.
But I think think it's something that presents a good opportunity for the state moving forward.
Yeah.
We need to take a look at this program, and we need to figure out what needs are out there for families and how we can get everybody back into the workforce, especially with our historically low unemployment numbers that we have right now.
Yeah, listen, let's take a break. When we come back, I want to get more into this, maybe even explain a little more about the whole concept behind block grants, all right, and how they work. And as you know, there's now this 10-care block grants, which is a completely separate thing than what we're talking about here, but even some controversy along those lines about how it will work and all that. So we'll be back with our guest, and if you have questions or comments, 737-7587, or just sit back and learn. We'll be back with more right after this.